and they talk about Islam. Men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has made of them excel one over the other, and because they spend out of their possessions to support them. Thus righteous women are obedient and guard the rights of men in their absence under Allah's protection. As for women of whom you fear rebellion, admonish them and remain apart from them in beds and beat them. Now that should be in inverted commas. Then if they do obey you, do not seek ways to harm them. Allah is the exalted great. So here the translation says beat. Now we need to look and see what beat actually means. Okay? Because nowhere and at no time did Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, actually say you can beat your wife. And he never beat his wife. As scholars have said, yes, you can use a toothstick, like a toothbrush, to hit them. But you can't hit them on an exposed area. You cannot leave a mark. You cannot strike the face. In other words, you can't bruise them. You can't hit them on the face. You cannot leave a mark. Okay? Now, if you were to look at the definition for the courts for abuse, you'll find it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same as the Islamic definition. And I'm sure none of you knew that. So now let's look a bit farther. That's the little bit that we're looking at. And now, was there a case in the Quran where someone made an oath to beat his wife? And the case of Ayub, Job, on whom be peace, he suffered from a disease, and he said that if Allah, and his wife was impatient, and he said that if Allah cured him, he would beat his wife 100 times, would strike his wife 100 times. And as you know, he recovered. Now, he wants to honour his oath because he swore by Allah that he doesn't want to hit his wife. So what happened? He was inspired, take in your hand a bundle of thin grass and strike there with your wife and break not your oath. So what he did, he took a handful of grass. The supposition, of course, is that it's equivalent to 100 blades of grass, and he struck once with 100 blades of grass on his wife. Did he leave a mark? Did he hurt her? The answer is of course not. Okay? That's how he was inspired. Now, we unfortunately cannot use that as a model for all time, because, for instance, the wife, the pronoun for the wife is not in the Arabic. And since it's not in the Arabic, there are other things that can be read into or not read into, as the case may be. And when we're talking about a general case, we have to make sure that it applies to the general case. And then, of course, he was a prophet, okay, as if that would make any difference. But we don't know, and that's why we can't use it as the norm. If we could, it would be easy, because the verb is exactly the same. Beat, or adrib, and that's beat them, and strike, fadrib. So you can see that adrib is the same in both cases. So in other words, the verb is the same. Okay, adrib. So if we could use that as an example, it would be ideal, because that's what it means. Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, who was considered the greatest person and knowledgeable on the Quran, after Prophet ﷺ, of course, he said that striking, in this sense, is like hitting with a handkerchief. And he was considered an extremist. You see how serious it is? At no time have we been told we can beat the wife. How can you beat the wife and then spend time in bed with her? Are we hypocrites? A man can marry up to 4 wives. Okay, let's ask anyone. Any man want to marry 4 wives? Oh, well, all shy now, aren't we? Eh? Now we're going to volunteer. All right. Marry women of your choice, 2, 3 or 4, but if you fear that you will not be able to deal equitably with them, then only one. So on the surface it sounds like marry 2, 3 or 4. That's the ruling. Go on out, marry 2, 3 or 4. Oh, there's a door slamming in your face. You've got to treat them equitably. What does equitably mean? If you like equally, but I prefer the word equitably. What does equally mean? Just think about it. And I talk to people who have been married to 2, 3 or 4 wives. Okay? In public as well as in private, because I was in Saudi for so long. Okay? So how do you treat them equitably? When it comes to the time for giving gifts, do you give each wife the same type of dress, the same type of jewellery, or the same value but different times? In the case of the house for the wife, do you give the same size house to each family regardless of the size of the family? Or is it prorated on the size of the family in terms of the number of rooms? Beginning to see the problem. If you live in the West and you have more than one car to buy for the wife, what type of car do you buy for them? And so on and so forth. Are you beginning to see the problem now? Very difficult to treat them equitably. What about for the children when it comes to the time for giving gifts? Do you just give a certain amount of money to the wife and say, you buy the children what they need? Or do you buy the gifts for the children? And so on. Right? But it's not just the wife that's affected now. It's your relationship with the child. But on top of that, no two people, or one person, cannot have exactly the same emotional relationship with two people. You understand what I'm saying? My feelings for one wife would not be exactly the same as my feelings for another wife. And no matter how much I tried, there would be emotional differences. Okay? And I've got to treat them equitably. You're beginning to see how difficult it is now. Okay? So we'll settle for one, shall we? Okay? Shall we settle for one? Husband is over the wife. Man is head of the household. Man is 1 degree above women. He's better than women. He's 1 degree above the woman. He excels the woman in responsibility and accountability. That's what it means. Why? Because the household is run like a mini Islamic state, where the husband, father, is like the ruler, and wife and the children form the Shari'ah council. The example for that is at the time of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when the Prophet ﷺ was there with his Salama, and the companions refused to sacrifice their animals or kill their animals and shave, cut their hair, come out of Islam. They dress for pilgrimage. And he said to Salama, what shall I do? They're not obeying me. And she said, if you do it first, they will follow your example. And that's what he did. Okay? So here, he purposely went to the wife and he asked her advice. I don't believe it's because he didn't know. I actually believe it's for our education. Okay? So that's why we should consult. But what happens after consultation? Someone has to make the decision, or a collective decision. Fine. And after the decision has been made, someone has to take the responsibility. Who takes the responsibility in the Muslim household? The man. And the person who takes the responsibility, he will be accountable to Allah on the Day of Judgment. Even if his children grow up to be bad children and sin, he will have to account for that before Allah. So he's 1 degree over the woman. He's responsible. He's accountable. You're not better. And then we have the saying of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, paradise lies at the feet of your mother. And someone asked him, after Allah, who should I serve? And the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, your mother. He said, then whom? He said, your mother. He said, then whom? He said, your mother. He said, then whom? Your father. So you take all these things into consideration when you talk about women's issues. Inferior spiritual status. In Islam, they are spiritually equal. They're created from a single soul. And created out of it, it's made. And from those two. They're spiritually from the same substance. Spiritually the same. Women praying behind men. Sorry. Let's go on a little bit more about this inferior spiritual status. What are we trying to do in our lives? Why are men and jinn created? To worship Allah. That's what the Quran tells us. We have created mankind and jinn to worship me. That's what Allah tells us. And that's men and women. And for each man and for each woman, there will be the same reward for whatever we do. So, spiritually, we are equal. But it's all a question of what equal really means. Right? I'm talking about in the sight of God. I'm talking about in the way God treats us. Okay? Are women praying behind men? Does this make women inferior, or is it practical? The Eastern Church, by the way, Eastern Orthodox Church, has no seats. Men, they all stand, and women are behind the men. Inferior or practical? I think we need to go back to the background information I gave at the beginning, and women trying to gain recognition, and how they think they're really being pushed to the back, when in fact they're not really. According to the Quran, when a man enters paradise, he will get houris, beautiful maidens. What will a woman have when she enters paradise? Everything's for the man. Man's better than the woman. Man's treated better than the woman. Complaint goes up and up and up. Why is the Quran sexist? Giving women nothing and men beautiful maidens from paradise. Well, let's look and see what the Prophet said. Peace and peace be upon him, when he was asked that question. Sorry, not there. I'll have to tell you from memory then, okay? What he told them, he was asked the question, if men get this, what will women get? And he said, what the heart has not desired of, what the ears have not heard of, and what the eyes have not seen. That's what the women will get when they go to paradise. Now think about it. What your heart has not desired of, that means something you've got no idea of, something you haven't heard of, and something you haven't seen. More than you could possibly imagine. Compare that with, you'll get a woman. I better keep quiet, hadn't I? You can see for yourself. Okay? The women will get something beyond what they can possibly imagine. All right? Now the Prophet ﷺ married a young girl. Right? 9 years old. 6 years old, it was betrothed. And for some reason, everyone wants to hold a gun to our heads about this. Anyone here doing social studies, social sciences? No? Well, you're not going to admit it if you are, right? If you talk to any sociologist, they will tell you, be careful of reading the past into the present and the present into the past. Why? Because things change, words change, situations change, and other things change, even the environment. Okay? Now, the first thing we need to do, what were the circumstances?